In this video, I'll demonstrate how we can merge multiple images with varying exposure values into a single high dynamic range image. The term dynamic range refers to the variation in light intensity that we can perceive with our eyes. We can perceive a much greater dynamic range than it is possible to display on a computer monitor or in a single photo. And this is due to the fact that we have pupils which can change size and let in more or less light. We have replicated this physiology in the aperture of a camera lens. So the aperture can let in less light or more light if the aperture is enlarged. And essentially that's what I've done here in this sequence of images here in the Chapter 4 folder. So go to Bridge and select the first photo here and press the space bar to view it full screen. This is a photo of my pond and garden in the background. Use the right arrow on the keyboard to move through the photos in the full screen mode. And as you do so, you'll see that each photo lets in more light so we can see more detail in the pond area, and at the same time we're seeing less and less detail in the garden, which is in this bright area, until ultimately we don't see any information here whatsoever. It's all washed out. But we also see the most detail in the dark areas here. So what we really want to do is bring all of these exposures together into a single photo, which shows us detail both in the shadows and in the highlights. Notice, however, that there's no single photo that contains all of this information. Press Escape to go back to the Bridge interface, and then switch over to Photoshop, choose File, Automate, Merge to HDR Pro, and then browse for the files and select them here. Hold down Shift and click the last item so that you've selected the sequence of photos. Click Open, and then make sure this is checked because I handheld the camera on each shot, and so there's going to be subtle variations as I breathed between shots. I had to adjust the exposure value between shots, so there was definitely some motion as my hands moved the dial on the camera. Click OK, and then Photoshop will analyze the images and automatically adjust them so that they line up. At the end of this process, it will show us all of this information in the Merge to HDR Pro dialog box. We have different choices here in the mode pop-up. Let's start at the highest bit depth, 32-bit. We can choose to remove ghosts here, and this will remove some of the halos around the objects. Uncheck this option, and this enables this slider. Go ahead and slide through the dynamic range, and you'll see that all of that information is here in this single interface. So we have all of that detail available to us now. This is great if this was our end goal. We have all that information, we can see it all on the slider, but for practical considerations, we need to merge this information into a single photo that shows it all without having to use the slider. And so to do this, we need to tone map the image. We can do that in Adobe Camera Raw if we check this option. Go ahead and click Tone in ACR at the bottom, and it will transfer this information over. This is really a lot of information with 32 bits per channel. It's a total of 96 bits in this RGB image, so we have a massive data set that we're dealing with. That's why it takes a bit of time to do this handoff. Here in Camera Raw, we can adjust the exposure, and you'll see that all of that information is still here. You can see detail in the garden and detail in the pond. But now it's up to us to find a happy medium here. I'm going to increase the exposure so I can see some of the detail in the pond, and then I'll decrease the highlights so that we can start to see detail in the garden here. So we can go ahead and make any adjustments that we wish here in ACR, and that includes not only the basic parameters, but you can make adjustments to the tone curve in the detail page and so on. I'll decrease the noise a little bit and perhaps increase the sharpening. And then click OK. So we're going to end up with a single image that displays detail throughout the dynamic range. And we have this as a smart object with Camera Raw as a smart filter. So we can double click here on the filter effect name and go right back into Camera Raw where we can make adjustments. Perhaps I'll adjust the color temperature a little bit here. And then click OK again. But we're left with a 96-bit image that is quite large at 126 megabytes. And this is because we still have all of that information available to us across all of those exposures in this single HDR image.